Hello, hello, hello. This is another episode of Marie's Message 411 TV, and I am Marie. Welcome to all my new subscribers. Welcome to my subscribers that have been with me from the beginning. For all my new subscribers, please go and watch my previous videos so that you can get acquainted with my channel. I welcome all of you. I hope that all is doing well. This is the beginning of the series of Narcissistic Women, Pregnancy and Motherhood. This is part 1. And this first part is where I go into detail and discuss the effects of the unborn child, the effects of the fetus of the unborn child. Because remember, in the previous video of the introduction, I let you know that I was going to start from fetus to childhood to adulthood and so on. These series of videos are very intense and sensitive, so I caution you when watching these videos. Some of the things that I might discuss might be very triggering for some. So I caution you. I got an article that I want to share with you. And the article came from BMCPSYCHIA.biomedcentral.com. So that's BMC psychiatric.biomedcentral.com. The subject that I want to discuss in this video goes as follows: effects of prenatal exposure to maternal cortisol and psychological distress on the infant development. The mental health status of a pregnant woman and its consequent impact on fetal well-being is not given much importance compared to the risk imposed by obstetric complications and medical conditions. Maternal psychological distress is a major public health problem and needs timely detection and intervention to prevent any adverse pregnancy outcome. There is ample evidence from literature that justifies the association of prenatal maternal mental stress and elevated cortisol with delayed infant motor and cognitive development. Evidence from India being rather limited. I think I lost my charger to my laptop. I have to put it back in. Okay, let's begin again. Evidence from India being rather limited, the study aim is to prospectively assess the association of material psychological distress and cortisol level with motor and cognitive development of the infant. A sample of 2,612 eligible pregnant women who have been registered for antenatal care at selected public sector hospitals will be recruited after obtaining written information consent. They will be assessed for the presence of material psychological distress in the form of depression and anxiety using appropriate scales, and saliva samples will be collected for cortisol estimation during early, mid, and late pregnancy. Follow-up visits after the delivery will be done on day 10, 3 months, 8 months, and 12 months. The Bailey scales of infant and toddler development will be used to measure both motor and mental milestones in terms of psychomotor development index and mental development index. Logistics regression model will be used to determine the association between the exposure variables and outcomes, which will be reported as odds ratio and 95% confidence intervals. Our study findings could add to the growing evidence that material psychological distress during pregnancy adversely influences growth and development in the offspring and subsequent development of the child. While natural anxiety and depression can be measured by using self-reporting instruments, estimation of material endogenous cortisol levels could serve as a biomarker of prenatal psychological stress. Findings from this study could be used to focus upon the burden of mental health problems during pregnancy and to consider steps to scale up prenatal mental health services in healthcare settings. Pregnancy is a time of psychology, mental, and emotional change. As a result, women are highly vulnerable to psychological distress that includes anxiety, depression, and stress. During this phase of complex and dynamic changes, the fetal organs and organ systems that are formed or are subject to both positive and negative influences, also known as fetal programming. There is ample evidence from literature that justifies the association of prenatal maternal stress with delayed infant motor and cognitive development, wherein it has been reported that high levels of maternal stress during mid-pregnancy was significantly associated with lower scores of motor and mental development of the infant. Prenatal maternal stress has been frequently linked with elevated levels of maternal endogenous cortisol. The cortisol hormone plays an important role in normal development of the fetus. During pregnancy, the maternal cortisol levels increases by 2 to 4 times. This increase has a positive influence on neural development. However, fetal exposure to excess maternal cortisol may result in impaired brain development as a result of neurotoxicity. Animal studies show that animal studies show that exposure to impaired I'm going to do that again. Animal studies show that exposure to prenatal stress induced a significant rise in maternal cortisol secretion by activating the maternal hypothalamus pituitary axis. Elevated levels of cortisol reach the fetus and modify the activity of fetal HPA axis. This modification of the fetal PHA axis exerts a detrimental effect on further growth and development through a series of complex endocrine mechanisms. In animals, prenatal stress also exerts an inhibitory effect on the placental enzyme, which converts maternal cortisol into inactive cortisone, resulting in a rise in amniotic fluid cortisol level, which affects fetal HPA functioning. The evidence of association of prenatal stress with elevated maternal cortisol levels in humans is rather weak. Nevertheless, there are few studies that have evaluated the effect of prenatal exposure to the elevated maternal cortisol on infant outcomes and observed an adverse effect on infant development and lower score of IQ in childhood. The timing of exposure to elevated maternal cortisol during the I'm getting tongue-tied. The timing of exposure to elevated maternal cortisol during the gestational period appears to be of significance. While one such study observed poor infant neuromotor development to be associated with exposure early in pregnancy, another one reported a significant association with exposure in the third trimester. While most of the studies have relied on maternal self-reporting of psychological distress to establish its linkage with adverse infant outcome, there are few studies in which prenatal stress did not appear influence infant and child development. Thus, this kind of self-reporting may have its own limitations in quantifying stress during pregnancy. So basically what they're saying is, for the ones that they didn't observe closely and they just asked them a few questions, they might not be getting the ultimate numbers and come to the proper conclusion, because these particular people that that were questioned that were pregnant, they're not sure if their assessment is correct or accurate, if that makes sense. So they can't really go off of that assessment, even though they did it that way, because it's not an accurate um, assessment. Few of the studies have used both measures for establishing the presence of prenatal stress. Self-reporting, so they're talking about the self-reporting, and that the women that did the self-reporting of this study, they're not sure of the accuracy of their study. Few of the studies have used both measures for establishing the presence of prenatal stress. Self reporting and measurement of maternal um, cortisol, and observed an independent significant association with adverse infant and child outcomes in each case. Evidence from India that depicts the association of prenatal stress with infant and child development is rather limited. A study done in GOA observed the existence of a positive association between psychological um, psychological morbidity during pregnancy, and low birth weight. So the child is psychologically morbid, and the child has a low birth weight. Another study done in India found prenatal maternal anxiety to be linked with elevated infant cortisol reactivity. So the anxiety of the mother and the stress of the mother can produce maternal high levels of anxiety and cortisol to the fetus. In another study, which was undertaken to explore the relationship between prenatal stress and infant temperament, in another study which was undertaken to explore the relationship between prenatal stress and infant temperament, it was seen that although the level of salivary cortisol was high in those infants, those mothers were psychologically distressed. There was no significant association with maternal reports of infant temperament. However, these studies have not explored the effect of prenatal stress and maternal cortisol level on the mental and motor development of the offspring. So they studied the temperament, but they did not study the maternal cortisol level and the mental and motor development of the offspring. The prevalence of maternal prenatal depression has been observed to be a little higher than 25% in low and middle income countries. While core importance towards screening for obstetric risk factors and medical conditions is the norm, in most settings, mental health of the pregnant women and its consequent impact on the fetal well-being tends to be overlooked. So there's not a lot of studies that are being done on this particular subject that I am discussing in this video at this time. Because my focus is to bring awareness to the stress, anxiety level, cortisol levels, the impact of what a fetus goes through if the mother is having high anxiety, if the mother is having high stress, if the mother is depressed, if the mother is psychotic or narcissistic, toxic, the actions of the mother affects the fetus directly. And that is the whole point of me doing this video, to start the series from part 1 and bring you through from conception and the stage of the fetus onto when the child is born, how the child is treated by this narcissistic, stressed mother, on into adulthood, and so on and so forth. This is very sensitive information, but it is important because now they are saying that it's not enough study being done to find out the mental state, the cognitive state, the impact of the high cortisol levels of that fetus and how it affects that unborn infant. And that is very vital and crucial to understanding what a child goes through during pregnancy of a narcissistic woman, after birth, and childhood. Because it's not only how the mother deals with the child directly after birth. This starts in the womb. This abuse of the mother to that child starts in the womb. And that is the purpose of me bringing this first part 1 to you, of narcissistic women, pregnancy, and motherhood. Mental health of the pregnant women and its consequent impact on the fetal well-being tends to be overlooked. Maternal psychological distress is therefore a major public health problem and needs timely detection and intervention to prevent any adverse pregnancy outcome. Given the above background, the aim of this study is to prospectively assess the association of maternal psychological distress and cortisol level with motor and cognitive development of the infant. The objectives of the study includes to describe the patterns of occurrences of maternal psychological distress during pregnancy, to determine the influence of maternal psychological distress on infant motor and cognitive development, to determine the influence of maternal cortisol level on infant motor and cognitive development, to correlate maternal psychological distress with maternal cortisol levels, which is what I was discussing with you before that there need to be more study done to determine the correlation between the maternal psychological distress with maternal cortisol levels. The proposed hypothesis are as follows, or the proposed hypothesis are as follows. Hypothesis: maternal self-reported psychological distress is associated with adverse infant motor and cognitive development. Hypothesis number 2: elevated maternal cortisol level is associated with adverse infant motor and cognitive development. So a concept a cons- a conceptual framework of the hypothesis depicting the exposure, outcome, and potential confounders is outlined. For those who do not understand what motor and cognitive development is, motor and cognitive development is, okay, motor skills. Motor skills are movement. If you hear the word motor, motor is like motorcycle, motor car. It moves. It's your movement. It's how your body moves. So they measure the motor skills, the movement of this infant. They measure the movement of this fetus inside the mother. The cognitive skills is about the brain. Whenever you hear cognitive, it concerns the brain and how the brain functions. So they are trying to measure the cortisol levels to determine how this high cortisol level affects the fetus when it concerns the movement of the fetus, the movement of the body of this infant. They are trying to measure what the high levels of cortisol, how it affects the cognitive and mental skills of this fetus and of this infant, their thinking abilities, their memory, all the cognitive has to do with the brain. So the brain function and the motor skills, the movement of this infant is what they are doing the study about. Because they have to measure the mental and the physical. And if you have a high level of distress, a high level of anxiety, a high level of depression, then the motor skills and the cognitive skills are going to be disturbed, and that infant, that child is going to be born with disabilities or disorders or illnesses. They stand a high chance. So this is the conclusion of this part 1. Like I said, these are series that I'm doing that are going to go into detail, and I'm going to be bringing you research and information, and I will be telling you where I'm getting my information from, so that if you would like, you can go and look and do your own research for yourself. This is a learning experience for me as well, because as I do my research and bring this information to you, I am learning um, about these things as well. Uh, so, I hope this video is able to help someone. It is very educational, very informative, though sensitive. So, I caution you when watching. This is Marie's Message 411 TV. Click like, click share, click the notification bell so that you can get updates to my videos that are coming in the near future. Leave your comments in the comments section and let me know what you think. And until next time, be good to yourself and be good to others. And I must say, bye-bye.